Okay, it's 7 p.m. We're calling to order the May 21st meeting of the Brattleboro Development Review Board. As you can see, somewhat to my chagrin, we're a short board tonight, only 4 people. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in my opening remarks, but the basic story is you still need 4 votes out of 7, even though we only have 4 people. We have a 5th person who's agreed to watch the video. And because I'm not particularly happy that some folks haven't showed up, we're probably going to have at least 1 or 2 more, but I can't commit to that because I don't know yet. What we do in this situation, generally speaking, is we offer the applicant a choice. You can go forward now and we'll give you a weather report, and you can continue, not do anything now and wait for a larger board. And then once we give you the weather report, if you choose option 1, then we can either vote or you can wait to see if there's more input from board members or if you want to provide more evidence based on the issues that arise as we discuss your application. I'm sorry for the short board. We had 2 meetings this month, which changed our schedule a little bit, but it's not really a good excuse at all. A few people here are veterans of DRB meetings, some of you are not. I go through the same opening remarks every time to explain the procedures for these meetings. So if you're not familiar with it, I suggest you pay attention to this. At the DRB, we hear applications for land development in the town of Brattleboro and appeals of zoning administrator decisions. Procedurally, we operate on the record. What that means is that we take a clear record of testimony from the applicant and any interested parties and then issue a written decision with our findings. Applicants and members of the public should be aware that because we're on the record, this is your only opportunity to comment on and provide evidence relating to an application. If our decision is appealed to the environmental court, that court will not take new evidence or testimony at its hearing. Instead, it will look at the evidence from our hearing, the regulations or applicable law, and determine if the evidence at our hearing supported our finding and decision. Only interested persons that participate in this proceeding tonight may appeal a decision made by the board, so I strongly encourage all of you to speak up at this hearing. Because we're on the record, one of the things I do is I swear people in who want to say anything about any application. It doesn't matter if you're the applicant or the neighbor or some other interested party. So if you think there's even some small modicum of a chance you're going to speak tonight, I'd ask that you raise your right hand. I'm going to swear you in. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give in the cause under consideration will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay, if you didn't get sworn in and you change your mind and you want to testify or just say anything at any point, you need to tell me so that I can swear you in. If you're not sworn in, we're not supposed to consider your testimony. If we don't catch it and then you give unsworn testimony and we rely on it, our decision is going to get appealed and we're going to be right back here anyway, so it doesn't make any sense from any perspective. Applicants require a majority vote of the full board to succeed. That means 4 votes out of 7. If we don't have a full board present to hear your application, we'll consider a request to continue your application to the next public meeting. After taking testimony, the board will close the public hearing and may vote on your application. The board will issue a written decision within 45 days of the close of the hearing. While we may vote on an application, it is the written decision that controls the timeline for appeal. It should be noted that the town of Brattleboro is a party with an interest in land development applications. The town does not have any special status before this board. Documents provided to the board by the town planning department, town attorney, or any other town representative are considered by us in exactly the same way as information from the applicant and any other interested parties. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from our May 7th, 2018 meeting.
So move.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Mr. Bannon, has our meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. I understand that Mr. Whittle has a conflict of interest on application 2018-48. He resides on an abutting land parcel. However, we've elected to go forward anyway because we know that at least one person can hear the video. That's Ms. Hasegawa, and I suspect it's going to be 2 or 3 more. I don't know, who's here from Brattleboro Housing Partnerships? Do you know whether you wish to go forward? I'm only putting you on the spot because you're the first application.
I think there's some people here that are here because of this application.
Well, what I would suggest is why don't we hear about your application? We'll take public comments from people who came here tonight to speak about it. We will likely tell you what we think about the issues without taking a formal vote. Because we only have 3 people here, I can't take a formal vote even if I wanted to. And what we will do is, if you'd like to go forward, we can take a vote of the 3 here so that if Ms. Hasegawa votes in favor of it when she reviews this video, you wouldn't have to come back. And if it turns out there are a bunch of issues that nobody foresaw, we can just continue on to the next meeting, and hopefully you'll have a more full DRB to hear it. We've had better attendance except for tonight. So before you start up, though, are there any other conflicts of interest or ex parte communications?
No.
Okay. So let's get started here with application 2018-48 Brattleboro Housing Partnerships. If you could just have a seat and tell us who you are.
Sure.
Is the TV camera able to get the images that are displayed up there?
Yeah.
Should we turn a bank of lights off? Or?
Sit on that end, please.
Maybe just.
Can Emily, would you mind turning off? If you fiddle with those switches enough times, you'll turn off this bank of lights right here. No. No. Yes. Perfect. Is that better?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, so please tell us about your project.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Cody. I'm a water resource engineer with Mylon and McBroom, and we have been working with the Brattleboro Housing Authority in our partnership for quite a while now, working on this Melrose Terrace property, and we are now moving forward with final design. So to get started, I just thought I would show a few pictures. I know many of you are familiar with Tropical Storm Irene. What has brought us to this point now is because of the historic flooding that occurs at this property. And if we look at this next slide here, this shows the approximate flood path that occurred during Irene, where the water actually overtopped a retaining wall here and was flowing behind all these buildings, where the whetstone actually is down this way here. So many of these buildings were damaged during Irene and have been historically damaged. So as part of the site, these are many of the flood hazards that are located on the site. We have the FEMA floodway, which is shown down here. We also have the FEMA floodplain, which is up here. The fluvial erosion hazard line is here, and then the Vermont River corridor is this dashed line here. So you can see the site is very prone to many different hazards.
Where do those come from?
Well, the FEMA lines are directly from the flood insurance study for the town of Brattleboro. And these lines are from the state river corridor work.
Okay.
And they just represent how the river wants to try and move around a bit and gives the river room to move. Unfortunately, we have development in these areas that we have to protect. So as part of the project, the first phase of the project, we went through a series of different alternatives and looked at many different options for trying to reduce the flood risks on this site, including, of course, we always look at no action, building removal, floodplain restoration, replacement of bridges, and also a combination of all of those together. And there's been a report prepared that summarizes all those alternatives and how we came to the preferred alternative. So under the preferred alternative, we are looking at demolishing 11 of the residential apartments buildings that are on the site. And part of that project will be to create and reconnect about almost 4.5 acres worth of floodplain. So that will become new flood storage given back to the river. And approximately 34,000 cubic yards of fill removed from that area, which averages about 5 feet. Average maximum, I believe, is around 7 feet. And there's also an installation of a overflow culvert. So this culvert will actually sit up a little bit higher than the normal channel and allow water to flow under George F. Miller, the bridge. It will be placed next to the bridge. And then also to protect the remaining buildings and infrastructure, at the rear of the floodplain will be some slope armoring to provide a protection against that. So a list of the primary benefits of this project are we're removing several of the buildings from the flood risk hazard area. Also reducing the flood levels locally and upstream of about 1 to 4 feet, depending on where exactly you are. Also, we limit or reduce the risk of the water flowing behind the buildings, because now we have more flood storage and the water will access that area first, rather than overtop the wall that sends water out behind the buildings. And it also creates an area for sediment and large woody debris. Any ice flowing down the river will store on the flood bench, on the restored floodplain, rather than becoming clogged at a bridge, such as the Route 9 bridge or the George F. Miller Bridge. So this is a view of our proposed plan, our title sheet, which we're working towards finalizing these plans. And this is the site. The dark gray shaded buildings are the ones being removed. So all of these buildings closest to the river. The light gray is the area that will become floodplain. That's the area that will be excavated and lowered so that the river can access that during, I believe, it'll access that floodplain during a 2 to 5 year storm. Whereas, the floodplain maps, the FEMA maps are based on a 100-year event. There's also, this is where the overflow culvert will be placed. And this back edge is where the armoring will take place to protect the remaining buildings and infrastructure. So now we have, these are cross sections. So if you took a slice through the site, this upper area, the gray represents a building to be removed, whereas this building is to remain. This hatched area is the material to be removed. And then we have the armoring here. So the upper cross-section and the lower cross-section are very similar, where you have the building removal and excavation of the material on this site. The middle section actually cuts through the George F. Miller Bridge. And you can see this is the existing opening here. And that's the overflow. To point out, the dashed line here is the existing 100-year flood elevation, and the solid black line is the reduction in flood. So that represents about a 1 to 4 foot lowering. So up here we have a larger, that's probably the 4 foot lowering here. That's likely about 2 feet, and here's probably also around 2 feet. Also on the restored floodplain, there'll be new plantings, revegetation of the disturbed land where the floodplain is being created. So this slide represents what is currently shown on the effective FEMA, FIS, and flood insurance maps. The dark line solid line is the 100-year floodplain, and the dashed line is the floodway. The pinkish shade is the property, the Melrose property, and then the purple colored lines are where FEMA has their cross-sections. And as part of our analysis of the whetstone, we had to recreate FEMA's data using our newest software. And that's what this table here represents. We are showing at each of the cross-sections, this is what's published currently in the flood insurance study. These are the results that we're getting with our computer model using their same data and their same modeling, except we're using a more current software. And we have to be within a half a foot at any location. So we've achieved that tie-in point and are able to duplicate their results.
I think it might be helpful, given that we have a lot of members of the public here who I think have an interest in this, if you described the difference between the floodplain and the floodway.
Sure. So the floodplain is the area that's inundated by a 100-year flood, and it represents the area that would be underwater. So the floodplain is projected out in either direction until it hits the terrain, the existing grade, for example. The floodway represents where the bulk of the water is moving downstream during a flood. And the way that's created is you essentially take the edges of your floodplain and you squeeze it down, and that until you have like a 1 foot of rise. And that is where the bulk of the water is moving during a flood of that size. So the next step was to update their model and their data using more recent, the best available data that we have. So we had survey of these cross-sections. In addition, we had other cross-sections surveyed. There's topographic survey of the property itself. And we also have recent LiDAR data that was available for this analysis. That, along with our new software that replaces software that was used in the early 1980s, just using that information and updating the modeling, we have these new delineations of the floodplain and floodway. So this represents what's out there now, pre-project, and the yellow is where the modeling shows the new edge of the floodplain, and this orange colored line is the new edge of the floodway, whereas the black lines are what's currently shown on the map. And as you can see, just by changing the geometry, we did see some reduction in flood elevation in order to get to meet FEMA standards, because the end result of this was to be a FEMA map change. We have to be at our upstream and downstream limit within that 1/2 of a foot. So we couldn't end our analysis at cross-section BA because we're at minus 1.9 feet. We had to extend it up to cross-section BB so that we would be within that plus or minus 1/2 of a foot. And unfortunately, the B actually just falls right off the map here, and our downstream limit is here. So these lines represent where we're tying into the FEMA data on both the upstream and downstream ends of our study reach. So we can kind of cycle back and forth here a little bit so you can see how that line changes. So this area over in here is actually outside of the floodplain now, whereas this up here is inside of the floodplain. And that's solely based on better topographic data and modeling techniques. So the next slide shows the proposed conditions once the project is constructed and the floodplain is restored. So the blue.
I ask this not really because it's relevant to your project particularly, but is that the little park for Tri-Park that got moved essentially into the floodway there? Is that the little row? Yeah, there.
Here.
That sort of nub.
Yes. Yep.
Jeez. Okay.
That's off of Glen Street,
Yeah, Glen Street. is
Glen
here.
Park, right?
Glen Park, okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So here with the darker blue is the new 100-year floodplain limits, and the lighter blue is the floodway. And if we cycle back and forth, you can see how the lines shrink in a bit. And that's based on constructing the new flood restoration project.
Yeah.
I just have a question about that dark blue line there.
Here.
Yeah, it seems odd. It's, your model is that, what is it, the road will accommodate? You know, it just seems
Yeah.
odd that there's a very odd shape there.
Yep, yeah, you're right. I mean, this is where that limit is now. So this whole area is included in the floodplain.
Yeah.
And then under, whoops, wrong direction here, proposed, that shrinks down a bit, but it's showing us that this section of the road would still be under some water.
And then, there's a, if I remember that area, Melrose Street, at some point along there, there's a bit of a hill. The
Yeah.
road sits much higher.
Yeah, that's back in here,
Hmm.
where it kind of rises up. This is low-lying all in here. And then that road.
And then sort of right at the tip of that blue, there's a property, I'm actually further to the left. There's a property that's not part of this, I guess. You see right where that purple, one of the cross-section goes through, no, a little to the right.
This one?
Yeah,
Yep.
and that would, for my picture, that would be sort of before the hill, before the road goes up the hill.
Yeah, I
I
think
see.
so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, this is, I think that hill starts like right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can proceed.
So again, here we have the reductions in flood that are ranging from, 1.5, 1.3, almost 5 feet right in this area. That extends upstream, up and around the corner. So that would be like a new effective base flood elevation once the flood mapping and the flood study is updated. The process we're under now is known as the conditional letter of map revision, and that's an application to FEMA that allows us to ask them, if we build this project, will the flood maps, will you accept this modeling and the flood mapping? The second part of that is a LOMAR, letter of map revision, which you follow up after the conditional with updated mapping, as-built data, and new modeling that matches that as-built data. So that's kind of where our project is at now. So I just described the conditional letter of map revision followed by a letter of map revision once the project is complete. We're working on the finalization of the FEMA funding, which is funding all of the construction. These are the permits that are underway. As part of the project, we'll need an Army Corps permit, the Vermont Stream Alteration Permit, and also a construction general permit.
Okay.
We are also working on our final design plans, and implementation of the project is looking to occur, at least the building demolition in 2018, followed by the floodplain restoration piece in 2019.
Okay. That's great. That's very helpful. Are there people on the board who have questions about this?
The, on this right here, you show the buildings the building that may be removed. On the ones that you just did previously, where are there buildings going to be staying there? Once
Yes.
this is done?
Yes.
Is that the plan?
Yes.
Yeah, so-
And where would that be in the floodplain, if you want to go back a little bit?
to show the new floodplain limits.
Yeah, I want to see where where the buildings that are going to stay.
So this is the existing here. These are the buildings that are staying in here
Okay,
and one in here.
okay,
And then the proposed, so, like these two buildings here would be outside. Whereas right now they would be inside. Same thing with these buildings here.
mhm,
So under the proposed conditions, these buildings and these would be removed. I think these over here are being demolished, as long as those around the corner here.
mhm, okay.
This may or may not be germane, but is it likely that this revision would occur when FEMA reviews its maps anyway?
It is, yeah. So anytime anyone does any project on a FEMA stream, they have to go through this same process. So they would also have to use the best available data, supplement the best topographic data you can have that's available, plus, supplemented with new field survey. So for example, this is a known constriction point that we looked at as part of our overall alternative analysis, the Route 9 bridge here. And so if anything ever happens here, they would also have to study the stream and have meet the same standards that we've met.
And conversely, you can't really do anything without going through this process, correct?
That's correct.
Hmm.
Yeah. Because there's a FEMA flood insurance study, it's a FEMA floodway, and also our funding required us to do a CLOMAR.
Right. Okay.
Just quick, this proposal's removing 11 buildings
Yes,
out of a total of
19.
19.
So I'd like to open this up to the public, but I don't want to be premature. Is the board satisfied?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, so members of the public, if I didn't swear you in and you want to testify, please tell me so I can swear you in. If you want to say something with respect to this application, if you see that microphone right there, that allows the people who are watching us at home on television to follow along. And, don't all run to the microphone at once, but if you do wish to speak, if you could just go up to the microphone, sure. Could you just say who you are?
My name is Aaron Diamondstone, and I heard quite a bit of
Am I
mention-
correct that you own the parcel, one of the parcels that's right next to this?
Right next to it, yeah.
Yep.
And I heard a lot of talk about reducing floodwaters at Melrose and above, but I'm curious as to what happens below.
So we are matching back into the FEMA data before you reach the Route 9 bridge. So in this stretch of the river here, we're matching back into the FEMA published data. So we're not reducing and we're not increasing the flood elevations in that section.
Is it correct that there would be a reduction in some of the severity or the speed of the water moving in a flood event because there would be additional capacity on the site?
Well, the biggest benefit really is with that floodplain there, you're going to get lots of, because the water spreads out and slows down. So if there's a log, for example, flowing down the river, it's going to access that first and slow down, and there's much more chance for that log to settle out on that floodplain than there will be here. So if that log jams here at the bridge, which is already kind of constricting the flow some, you could get an increased backwater.
Right. So
that
even
could raise the flood elevations through this reach.
So even though their elevations stay the same, they might enjoy some kind of secondary benefits from this?
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing to note also, FEMA doesn't, at least currently, looks at only clear flow, meaning the water moving down the stream without any debris or sediment
Right.
in the water. So that's, we saw that recently in Irene, where a lot of the culverts and bridges were clogged up with sediment and debris, causing these backwater effects to occur.
Other members of the public who wish to speak to the application? Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Wilmot. I live at 40 Glen Street, the budding property just across the brook there. Can I ask about the buildings that are remaining, the 8 buildings that are remaining? Are they to be used as housing, or do they have a different use now?
Excuse me. The reason those buildings are remaining is because they're currently being used for the 25 remaining residents in the public housing program. So, once we build phase 2, which we hope to be done, do that in the next 2 years, then those buildings will be empty. And I can't say, the intention is probably to tear them down, but among those is the very large building in the front that you see when you come down George Miller Drive. That building actually made it through Irene totally dry. So, I don't know what people are gonna wanna do 3 years from now, but certainly no residential use. You can't have anybody spending the night there, but we will have 6 buildings, and including that very beautiful building, that will remain, and perhaps people at that point will want to do something else with them. My silly little thought is, gee, wouldn't that make a nice community center for West Brattleboro? But I don't know who's going to own it and operate it and do all that stuff. But so I can't say, I can't predict, but they will stay there until the rest of the 25 people are moved, or in the event that we have a flood and those buildings are impacted, then we'll have to take them out of service earlier as residential use.
And just to clarify for people who don't know what you're talking about with phase 2, I think you're
Oh,
referring
I'm
to the
sorry.
new Red Clover Commons, but
Yes.
if some people are here interested in wondering where are these people gonna go, I think if you could just explain that.
Sure. So we have now identified that we hope to put an addition at Red Clover Commons over the existing surface parking. And that would be for up to 20 residences. And then we'll be getting tenant-based vouchers for people as well. So that would be the relocation site, will be Red Clover Commons.
And your permit has been approved,
Oh, it has?
hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
No, he says.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Got me all excited.
When we have 2 meetings in a month, it kind
I
of
know.
throws
I know.
things off. I'm sorry.
So
Did you-
there's work to be done there, but we have a site and it looks promising.
While I'm here, may I ask, who owns the property and who will own and manage the floodplain?
So the property now is owned by the Housing Authority, and it is also owned because of a declaration of trust with the federal HUD. They have a great deal to say about it. At the end of this whole project, this property will no longer be under HUD, and it will be owned by a third party, probably a nonprofit, is what we would hope. So we'll be starting at some point pretty soon to approach nonprofits to see if they would be interested, statewide nonprofits, to see if they'd be interested in taking this, especially the flood land, the mitigation land, not just the nature. What one group is taking the Sosasimo land. So we would be looking at a statewide nonprofit or maybe a national nonprofit conservation group to take the floodway, the flood mitigation area, and hold it.
Good.
So that the intent is that it would be deeded as a flood restricted only in perpetuity.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay?
Thanks. Are there any other people who wish to speak regarding this application? Okay,
I
so,
have a couple questions that came up.
shoot.
So just to put it into context, the proposal is remove 11 buildings. If I did the math, that leaves 8. Or 7?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And most of those buildings, you said, are residential housing, which, except for the large, let's call it the...
Well, our office is one of
Oh,
those
okay.
buildings, and
Okay.
the large building does have apartments in it.
Okay.
And our garage we have a maintenance garage that's across the street, and that's included in those buildings.
Okay. And then the quick history is the whole complex was built which year?
Sure. Melrose, they started Melrose in 1963, I believe. They opened it in 65.
Okay.
It first flooded within about 4 months of being opened.
Okay, interesting.
Cindy Martell at the fire department and I did an exhaustive search on the history of the flooding, and it flooded often. In fact, the wall that is built, the people at Glen will know, the wall that's at the top of Melrose was put in 4 or 5 years after the development was fully occupied and operating to stop the flooding that they kept having. That was just in recognition. So it was a flood-prone property when it was developed.
Yeah.
There was fill put in, and it's remained a pretty flood-prone property.
Yes. And then I had a question, I don't know, Brian, you may know this, but the idea of putting the vegetation in that sort of, what's the term, the open space to anticipate flooding, is there any recommendations, whether it comes from FEMA or whatever, to put in a certain type of vegetation that might catch some of these debris coming down?
We're going to recommend administrative approval of a finalized planting plan and erosion
Yeah.
control plan.
Okay. I was just curious if certain choices of vegetation may help in the future.
If we all vote in favor of that.
Okay.
But that's.
All right, I just thought I'd bring that up as a question.
I think FEMA does have particular types of planting it does and does not want to see, but
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what those are.
Okay, there was a mention of the possibility of catching things before they got to that constriction point at Route 9. And so just, if we did have some say on vegetation, which I believe we will, if there was a certain type of vegetation that may encourage things not getting to that constriction point, it may be for the benefit of a lot of people.
My assumption is when you review that plan, that's going to be your primary interest.
It's certainly something I can look at.
Okay.
I think it will really be driven by whatever FEMA
Right.
requires.
FEMA will have very specific ideas about everything.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wonder if we introduce the concept of, the catching things before they hit that Route 9 bridge, it may benefit a lot of people.
So,
The one part that I want to point out that's just to be really clear for neighbors and people that are living in there, one of the things that we're very committed to and we've talked to the fire department about is that we will maintain both egress and access into this property so that the back of Melrose Street, even though some of it at that pink line will be cut off, we will develop a new road, and I actually have figured out exactly where it will go, but it will come through and attach to the George Miller Bridge, so that there will be continuous
points.
circulation through that property. And the house at the corner, which somebody here knows the people that own it, will not be sort of isolated without a road. It will have a road and access.
Okay.
thank you. So with that in mind, how about a motion to approve application 2018-48 with the condition that the applicant file a finalized planting plan and erosion control plan with the zoning administrator?
I'll move that.
All right.
I'll second.
Okay, now we're going to take a vote here, but we still need a confirmation as to Ms. Hasegawa being willing to be the fourth vote. So I think we're going to need 3 ayes, is that right? Well, no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nobody? And no abstentions except for
You're
Mr.
an abstaining.
Well, he's not appointed.
I'm sorry, what?
He's an alternate and he's not appointed because he's got a conflict of interest.
Oh, okay.
In any event, we will let you know as soon as we have word from a fourth person. My expectation is that reviewing this video is not going to be a terribly controversial activity for them. And I will ask Mr. Bannon to stay on top of them to get a response to you as quick as possible. So thank you. Sorry to leave this up in the air.
Well,
Have a
understand,
nice
but
night.
thank you very much for.
Sure.
I had one thing, this doesn't have to do with my vote, the affirmative or the unaffirmative. NEYT just took down a building recently, and it broke my heart because it had a slate roof and they just tossed it. And it got against my sense of being a Vermonter. I mean, that's valuable slate. Somebody would have paid you to take that off. Do you have slate roofs?
We do not.
All right.
But let me tell you.
Knock it down then.
No, we are, currently our buildings are being used by both the state police and the local fire and police department for training.
Oh, okay.
And we will salvage every single thing we possibly can before those buildings come down. So, yeah, we don't want to lose anything.
It's a shame to knock down slate roofs because that stuff will last
Yeah.
forever.
It is.
No.
All right, thank you very much,
Thank
folks.
you.
As soon as these guys make way, the next application is 2018-53, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. And, okay, that's fine. Okay, so, yeah, that's fine. I mean, so there's one thing that I think we should, I wanted to raise this either way. There were a bunch of notations throughout the application about the need for a wastewater permit with the state and some explanation as to the overflow. And that was emailed at 4:30? Just emailed this afternoon, right? Am I mixing this up with a different application?
I didn't see anything. But I didn't check
We're
it
talking
till 4
about culture
o'clock,
aid?
so.
My mistake. I'm mixing up two different things.
Okay.
I got an email with something else at 4:30. I didn't have time to review it, and I figured out nobody else did. So, just quickly while these folks are setting up, my understanding is that the applicants for 2018-55, is it Dr. Michaelis, wishes to continue their application so that they can get a full board, which is totally fine. So I think we should have an application a motion to continue 2018-55.
So move?
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Brian, this will be continued to our hearing. Is it the regular third Monday in June, or do we have any holidays? Okay, so this will be rescheduled then to June 18th.
Okay.
And I'm very sorry that we don't have a full board tonight. It's extremely frustrating. But so all those in favor of continuing application 2018-55?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. You can go home and we'll be back here in June at that same date. Okay, so application 2018-53, do you guys need a couple minutes?
We're good?
Ready to go? Okay, please tell us about your project.
So, I'm Brett Sanderson with Stevens and Associates. Here representing the BDCC and Culture Made of Vermont. The BDCC owns a current property there, which is sort of now known as L3, which is the business.
Craig, can you close the door? Sorry. I apologize.
That's
I
fine.
don't have as good hearing as you would expect from someone my age. Go ahead.
So the BDCC owns the property. They're working with a new company called Culture, which is looking to convert the building, which is currently a manufacturing building and industrial park, into a building that makes both dairy and non-dairy beverages. And as part of that, they would, I guess what I'll do is I'll show you what the current situation is, which is this. Currently, John Sice Drive comes up through here, GS Precision, which was one of the last, is the last building on the road. The interstate is just off the map here, it's actually probably on the map, but just off the topo. And the building in question is this building right here. And it actually, L3 occupies one lot, but the proposal actually has work happening on the neighboring lot as well. Right now, the lot has one building, it has, this is,
It's common ownership, right?
I believe it's common ownership, is that correct? Correct.
Those are all currently owned by Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation.
And they actually own this lot up on the back as well.
Right.
What's another good area?
So currently, the truck loading for this building comes into the rear.
Can we take one step back? There's one board member who I don't think, you're not familiar with where this is.
No.
Let's start there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting a little confused too.
It's in the Exit 1 Industrial Park.
So as you come in, you've got GS Precision right here in your right.
You go all the way up to that little turnaround at the end.
I guess I've never been that far. I thought there was a,
You never test drove one of David
Never
or
test
Kelly
drove,
was
yeah.
coming.
It's
Thought there was
basically-
a-
It's a dead-end road.
is it past the plumbing
It's the
supply?
next,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the next building past
Oh, okay.
FW Web.
Okay, so it's way up
So
there.
there's a stretch, this is actually FW Web right here, this building right here.
Oh, web building. Okay, great. Now I have my,
You can
thank
probably
you.
see the parcel best
Can-
from the highway.
You
right?
actually see great from 91.
Oh,
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So
And
when you
there's-
when you come off exit 1, it's not where all the discount stores are.
No, no. you
Okay,
turn-
I'm too far.
You go south, like you're going to Guilford or Algiers.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's John Sice Drive, which is the
Okay.
first, large.
All right.
There's a,
Yep.
like, brown and white sign that says Exit 1 Industrial Park there.
Okay. Guess I never noticed.
So
You can't see anything.
in
from
one
the drive.
reference to it, could we say it's the top of the hill?
It's
Okay.
pretty close to the top of the hill.
Okay.
All right,
Yep.
now I know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's one building left, and that's this one right here. This is the GS Precision building. It's the next one past it. For that photograph, you can see the rendering right there.
Yeah.
That is actually sitting in front of the GSP building. so
Okay.
we'll go back.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Just to be clear, there are two GS Precision.
Yes,
buildings.
there's one at the bottom of the
John Sice
hill
at the
and then
bottom,
one at the-
and then 347 on the top.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now that we're oriented a bit better, please continue.
Thank you.
So, so this is the current building, this is where the trucks come in, and the driveway for the parking is above it. And it's right here, it comes with that little cul-de-sac turnaround. And it's actually 2 stories, this building is a 2-story building. Where, like I said, you get access from the truck loading in the rear, and the top is where currently all the offices are, and the manufacturing took place in the lower section.
Can I ask a question about access quickly? I'm sorry to jump in, so. There was a note about milk receiving backing into the receiving bank.
Yep.
Could you just show us on the picture what that
Some of them,
means?
actually, it is 2 places. I'll show on this one. It actually shows up in that picture you have right here. If you go here, you can actually see the truck pulling, either backing in or pulling out. But
Oh, okay.
That's right there, the color.
there you go.
Yeah.
So I can show you, it's in the same vicinity as the driveway.
Frederick?
Okay,
But when you look at it from the site plan perspective,
so they would drive past and then back in?
that's right.
Okay,
So if we look at the building, this dark line is the existing building, and there's essentially an addition that goes in the front that services these silos, and then there's a milk receiving bay that's along this northern edge. And then this is a larger addition, which is where the storage, warehousing, and the truck loading is for
Okay.
shipping. But the receiving is right here.
Right.
So what happens is a truck drives up John Sice Drive past FW Web. It'll actually drive so it's parallel but in front of the building. And then it'll turn and back up. It won't turn around, it'll just back up and swing into the milk receiving bay. So the back end drives in, and it actually pitches backwards because it has to actually, the front of the truck has to be higher than the bottom of the truck to dump it.
Mm-hmm.
It'll dump, and then there'll be a cleansing that takes place inside the bay, and then it'll just drive right out.
And am I correct that this is functionally a cul-de-sac in the sense that these guys will have total control over what's going in, what's going out, when it's going in, when it's going out?
They have a pretty good sense of when, you know, it's scheduled, yes.
I
And
don't
there's-
just mean the deliveries, I mean all of the traffic.
Yes.
There's not gonna be other people going to other places that are gonna be in this.
Oh, I see what you're
area.
saying. You want to speak to that?
Well, the folks at 347 John Sites Drive will drive past this building. But
Okay.
that traffic is probably limited mostly to shift changes. And there's not a lot of delivery up
And
there.
actually, that's what's happening here as well, for the most part. It's relative to shift changing.
Okay,
And the truck traffic is, as we understand, is fairly, it's not, I mean, there is truck traffic, but it's 3, maybe 4 trucks a day is what we understand to be.
okay. Okay, you can go ahead, sorry to interrupt you.
No, feel free. So, since we're at the truck, this is actually this will continue to be the truck area. So this is the milk receiving in this bay right here. And then trucks will actually drive past that, come into this area and back into a loading dock that's right here. And that's typically for shipping. It'll be for, and actually delivery of dry products, packaging products, things like that. Waste is actually in here as well, but the waste is actually internal to the building, but there is a dumpster that's, I believe the dumpster is actually internal as well, isn't it? So there's no need for external dumpsters. There's, in order, if we stick with this area, one thing I hadn't mentioned yet is there's wetlands on this site. When they developed this lot back in the 80s, I believe the BDCC's intention was that this would be a commercial lot here. And there's actually an active stream through here that shows up on the USGS map, and there's wetlands in this area as well. We believe that the wetlands have actually propagated and grown since then. And we actually had we had 3 different wetland surveys. One that was old, which was no good, so we had it, and we basically were using that initially through the winter. And then we had a new one that was done, but it was done prior to the emergence of the wetlands, of species, the plants. And so what you have here is that one. And the state wetland biologist wouldn't come to the site until we actually had emergence take place, which makes sense. So when she came out to the site, she said, yes, there's certainly wetlands here, but I'd like you guys to redelineate this. And she was indicating that it was actually, we showed more wetlands than what is her opinion that there are. So this wetland boundary will actually shrink. And we've had a chance to get out there because it just happened to pick up that data, but we haven't had an opportunity to transpose it on here. So the long story short is that, you know, we have buffers that we're impacting here, but the amount of buffer impact is going to get reduced once we overlay the correct or the newer wetland delineation on here. There is some, this is mainly buffer impact, but at the driveway there is actual small wetland impacts. That's probably not going to change a whole lot. That's probably going to stay relatively consistent because that's where
You can leave that open now.
that's where the culvert that goes underneath the driveway here discharges. It's basically created a wetland. Yeah.
Okay.
To mitigate for that, we actually have created retaining walls, and those retaining walls are 6 to either 14 or 15 feet tall. And with the tallest, basically the 6-foot or the shorter walls being closer to the road that you can see. And as you start to go through this section, it's generally speaking is 12 to 13 feet tall. And out here where the slope goes away, it starts getting taller. And we did that mainly to avoid wetland impacts, so we weren't getting into those natural resources. And also to avoid a riparian buffer impact.
If you just said this, pardon me if I didn't understand it, but where's the overflow gonna go?
The overflow for this, there's actually little, I hadn't mentioned that, yeah,
Okay.
but so we're gonna have a stormwater system that's gonna go through get permitted through the state. We're looking for it to have basins that are below the parking area here, and you can see these dash lines that work through here.
Mhm.
Those are existing ditch lines that are in the wooded area, and what we're looking to do, or anticipating to do, is actually tie into those. So we'd be discharging those existing ditch lines is our hope.
Okay. Bike parking?
I'm sorry? Bike parking.
Bike parking.
Yeah.
Where are we gonna put the bikes?
I think that we haven't shown it on the plan yet, but I would like to put it up by the retail area, which I hadn't got to talking about yet. This place will have an employee entrance that's at the upper story, the second story here, and there's a retail outlet area, if you will, for factory-made product. It's not a major source, but it is a small source of this building, and I would expect that in this general vicinity we're going to put one in, which we don't have a bike rack on the plan at this point.
Staff wondered why there wasn't an additional shade tree in the bump out from the southwest
Right
portion of the
there.
building. Yes.
2 reasons. One is that we're looking at future expansion, and it's possible, if this thing goes in the right direction, they'll be expanding in this direction.
Mhm.
And we are looking to not put up a tree just to take it down.
Sure.
If this is the other area, this was actually, we look at that area being sidewalk, not for trees. We look
Is this
at
north-
there's a sidewalk that's going through this area to connect the parking lot to the front entrance.
Could it be, wow, geez.
I'm not sure which one they were referring to.
Do you know?
It was the first one you mentioned.
This one here?
Yeah.
It's kind of the northwest, isn't it?
Yeah, northwest,
Well, whatever.
yeah.
Can you tell us about some efforts that are being made so that this project is energy efficient? LED lighting?
Yeah, you want to speak to that?
Sure. On the process side, Efficiency Vermont has taken a very active and very much appreciated role in choosing and designing the layout of the building. So as a manufacturing facility, it's going to have a fair amount of energy consumption through some pretty large equipment. And they are joining project meetings every week now. The principals and Efficiency Vermont are identifying the best equipment to use to reduce the amount of electricity in the plant. And I think they're even providing some grants, again, much appreciated grant money, to support the purchase of equipment that probably has a longer payoff in efficiency savings than could otherwise be afforded. So they're getting some good equipment that way. And I think we've also discussed, I don't know if it's not currently part of the permit and part of the plan, but there had been some discussion about putting solar photovoltaics up on the roof as well.
Could I speak speculatively? I find it interesting in these large operations that we had the brewery here talk about taking a space that had rooftop solar, not in the sense of photovoltaic, but actually heating water that they'll probably use in a brewing process. So it's just certain ideas that, again, I don't know if it's the purview of our board, but it would seem to me as if you're making yogurt, probably heating water is probably required. And I'm just curious if there's some exploration of that, of using solar, not in an electrical sense, but in terms of heating water. And then I look at this cold storage, and it just, again, it baffles me in this digital computer-controlled age that there aren't HVAC systems, and maybe there are, that wouldn't take advantage of the cold days to actually pull in air from outside that's already cold. So again, those are just two concepts that hopefully are being discussed with
Sure,
efficiency
let me make
Vermont.
one slight but important correction.
Okay.
No yogurt. This is not a yogurt
Oh, I
manufacturing
apologize.
facility. That's okay.
I just saw, what did I see? Fermentation? And so my
Cultured dairy
mind
and
jumped.
non-dairy drinks.
I'm sorry, my mind jumped to yogurt because I saw fermentation. So obviously there are other type of dairy that is not yogurt
Exactly.
that is fermented. I apologize.
Yeah. And yeah, that's great. I just actually, as an aside, I ended up taking down because it had reached its peak, it had reached its useful life of a solar water heater on my house.
Okay.
I don't know if two things would have to talk to the principals about. One is, is their demand peaky enough that it would be met, and they'd have to I guess, some storage
Yeah.
tanks, and if they had to if they had to plan for that peak. And then if on the air intake, I'm not sure, as a food manufacturing facility, I think that they probably have some pretty stringent requirements on air intake. I know you can sometimes capture the energy of air without circulating the air, but we can talk to the principal.
I think maybe just the concept, again, it's maybe not be our purview, but it'd be nice that if those conversations were happening with Efficiency Vermont. But the idea of, I think it's called a air-to-air heat exchanger.
Yeah.
So that you can utilize existing temperature conditions to reduce some of your energy use. That's. I just wanted to bring that up, not take too much time with it.
No problem. I was curious, is there a need for right-of-way here? Is it possible that one of the parcels could be sold and create an issue? Or the parcel's just gonna be merged and treated as one
What's that?
parcel?
There's 3 parcels here right now, or I guess maybe 4. There's the GSP parcel that's right here, that's being occupied GSP. There's this parcel up here, which is a vacant parcel, which has essentially a right-of-way, but it's a parcel of land that goes through it.
Mhm.
And then there's the one that the current building occupies, and then there's the larger empty parcel that we're looking to, utilize as well. Which one do you have?
I just understood that this took place on 2 parcels. Do I have a fundamental misunderstanding?
No.
there?
There's the overflow or expansion or
It's
second
future, it's
phase
future,
parking
yeah. If we-
is on
we-
BDCC property, but a different lot.
Okay, so then.
That
if-
kind of spaghettis down off of the top of the hill,
Okay.
all the way down to John Sites Drive.
So the idea is that there might be some development in the future that would require those 2 things to be tied together, and then you would have.
And then we'd have
something
to
doing
figure
all-
out how to get back up to the very top of John Sites Drive that's
Okay.
currently wooded now, and accommodate the parking, the future parking.
Okay, but for
You
the
are
moment.
right, James, though, that lot 6, which is where L3 is right now, and the adjacent lot with the wetland are currently 2 separate lots, and there will be a lot line adjustment so that they're accessible.
Okay, this is gonna end up being one big lot. Great, that solves that problem. How noisy is this gonna be?
Less noisy than the highway.
Touche.
It's gonna meet the standards for the industrial law. I mean, don't anticipate it being any more noisy than a normal industrial law would be.
Meeting the standards sounds fine to me.
Yeah.
Could you show on the map where the snow storage is gonna be, please?
Yep. We're looking at this area right here, this area right there, this area, essentially up there.
The point was to have it go on the other side from the wetlands, so,
Right.
the wetlands are downslope, snow storage will be on the uphill side.
There'll be a guardrail and a fence along this edge to prevent, well, it's a safety purpose for one thing, but it'll also prevent easy dumping of salt snow in the wetland area.
That's all the questions I have. Other members of the very minimal board we have tonight?
I had a question about the, I guess this would be sort of a truck backup area. And just on this illustration, I'm just curious what that sort of rectangular,
It's a stormwater
Those are the
system.
infiltration chambers,
okay.
and that's still subject to being designed. We're going through the state stormwater permit process.
So, and then just, because I'm a
C4?
visual person, and this is a very interesting rendering. So some trucks, the trucks with liquid will be entering here,
Correct.
and then trucks that will be picking up product will, I presume, enter here and then back up to those docks. And that's why the proposed concrete is an area where the trucks can.
Start turning their wheels and ripping up asphalt and having the extra weight. Yep.
So that's why that is listed as proposed concrete as opposed to asphalt in the other locations.
Correct.
And then from, just to get my head around it, from this rendering, essentially what exists there is a metal clad, very large, like a box, and what's being proposed here is something with a little bit more architectural style.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, well, it's also a retail area, so the idea is to make it look more appealing.
So presumably, looking at that rendering, you'd have perhaps
That's-
office entrance
Exactly.
and then a retail entrance. Okay.
Questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, and then I guess what we're talking about, this rendering doesn't show any of the beautiful small
No,
trees that
it
will
was
be
ahead of
placed
time.
there to mitigate some of the,
That's correct.
the
It is missing all that. That shows up on the other site plans, both C3 and C4. We have some landscaping there.
You need to use your imagination.
I don't know, it's the digital age, if you guys could just pull up trees from a file and drop them into place,
There you go, right?
spruce up that rendering.
Other questions from members of the board? I'll just note for the people at home, we don't have any members of the public, which is why I'm not asking for public comment.
Could I ask one other question?
Yeah, sure.
You brought up bike racks, and I know John Sites Drive, and I know that some properties in town, if people need to do things, zoning kicks in that they have to put in a sidewalk. And I certainly don't see that this is applicable, but do we have any say in the idea that the town might want to put in striping for a bike lane? That people may actually want to bike up to Culture Made and get some of their
No.
fermented dairy products? That's
Yeah.
not our purview.
I think we'd have to take it to the traffic safety committee,
Okay.
and then ultimately the select board would have to approve it. Is that how it goes?
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, to a certain extent, the only retail that I know that exists there is you can go to the electric
We could
place.
make, we could make them build like the world's smallest bike lane from the edge of the road to the bike rack.
Well, it's just, it was a good hill for soapbox derby, but I don't think they do that anymore.
Okay, so I have in mind a motion to approve this application with conditions, goodness gracious, that the applicant put in bike parking or a bike rack.
Do we have any,
Stormwater permit approved by the state.
Yeah,
Work with Efficiency Vermont to increase their efficiency.
what about the new wetland survey?
There will be a
What am I
state
missing again?
wetland permit as well.
Sorry,
The new, apparently the wetlands, the delineation is gonna be changed.
We're gonna need to submit a revised site
Right.
plan anyways, which will show
Right.
that information on it.
Okay.
And you should also know that we are, like with a stormwater discharge permit, we are gonna get a state wetlands permit as well for the work within that buffer. It's considered a class 2.
so we'll just make the stormwater and the wetlands permits conditions then.
Okay.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yep.
was it, in the draft decision was a mention of the charging stations?
Oh, I think they provided for that.
It says 2 electric charging stations per 20 parking spaces shall be installed.
It's one electric charging place per 20?
It's 1 per 20.
Okay, so this might be a typo in the draft decision.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So what would we anticipate for total number of charging stations based on what's proposed for parking?
It's 3. I think it's 3.
Okay.
They've got 54 spaces.
Again, just one perception instead of thinking of it as a requirement is it could be a draw for a retail space.
Absolutely.
So that people who are going to travel with an electric vehicle would know, oh, I can stop there, I can charge the car, I can get some of this fermented dairy product, so.
It's better than Price Chopper.
Well, you've got a bunch of electric stations there too. I just bring that up.
Anyway,
because I was
so can we get so moved?
Oh, I have one other question,
Shoot.
Mr. Chairman. On 15C, there's a reference to lot 58 that will be purchased as part of the project. I'm not sure I understood exactly which lot that was, but I could be. I looked at maps online and I didn't immediately see a lot 58, but that might be a reference I don't understand. C15C.
I think that's probably 5B.
5B?
I think that's it. That may
Oh,
be
yeah.
Oh,
typo.
these used to have like a 5. They used to, yeah, okay.
Which is the
Well,
one that has
it
the
sounds
wetlands.
to me like it's premature to have a condition in here requiring that the parcel remain functional. I mean, sometimes we would want you to get a right of way if there was, you know, somebody
Just
else.
call it a common ownership.
Right, I don't think it's a necessary condition, so if somebody else on the board disagrees with me, feel free to tell me. But
I'm a bit confused about what the concern is.
sometimes somebody builds something on parcel B, and they're buddies with the person who owns parcel A, and it's no big deal, everything works great, and then parcel A gets sold, and you have big problems. And even though that's really the applicant's problem, oftentimes we require that they get a right of way
Yeah.
in order to make everything work, because it just makes sense to do. Or, you know, sometimes there are other considerations that we take into account. Here, where everybody owns all the land commonly, where it's all owned by the BDCC, and it sounds like the only reason they would need access to an additional parcel is if there's an expansion. I don't see it as, I see it as kind of a surplusage
So
condition.
is the immediate abutter to this also the BDCC?
So
On both
on
sides.
both sides it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is-
Then it doesn't seem to be a concern.
I don't think so.
I don't see it.
If nobody else does, then let's get a so moved.
I move?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice, you don't get very many butters coming to your meetings and you own all the surrounding property.
This is like the bare metals today.
You drove the
Should we
check
go
today.
on to the one that,
Brian, just before we close the meeting, do the people who came here for the application for the Poulos, were they on the notice list? Are they gonna get a notice of the new meeting, you know?
Well, if it's continued to the date certain, we don't renotice it.
No.
okay. So
Do
we
you have any
should hold on to the
contact with them? Do
paperwork?
you know who they are? I think one of them's Arlene Hanson, actually.
Yeah, they've showed up at all of these, so it's pretty comprehensive.
Are they the supportive neighbors? Do I remember that correctly? Concerned neighbors, okay. Well, if there's anything that we can do to make sure that they have some form of notice, even if it's not legally required, I think that would be in everybody's best interests, because I would, yeah, I'd feel bad if we continued that and then some interested party who did come here couldn't.
There's definitely a concern and interest.
Yeah, okay. So, also, can we start an email chain inquiring as to Mr. Annis's boat availability for the, our annual meeting and fun, happy time that you only get if you're on the DRB, but you could volunteer for and get this for free, just like Mr. Keel.
There's gonna be ice cream on the boat?
There's gonna be ice cream, yeah. Yeah.
I'll share it, KT.
Yeah, right.
So, that's all I had for administrative matters.
Did we come up with a date for our fun time? Not yet, huh?
Just after the July meeting, right?
After July,
After
okay.
the July meeting. I just wanted to get the planning underway because
Oh,
last
okay.
year it didn't happen.
Didn't,
And I very much appreciate everybody showing up tonight. If we have another meeting and you can't show up, just send an email and say if you're willing to watch video or not. And if you're watching this because you didn't show up to the meeting, I wish you had done that.
didn't we have, just, I know everybody wants to split, but didn't we have site visits that apparently we got
We had a,
for the whetstone? That I missed that one, right?
yeah,
That was more of a planning commission
Oh, planning, oh, okay. Wasn't us.
There's one other thing coming up though, isn't
Brian,
there?
you mentioned a visit by perhaps somebody from the state regarding historic properties?
Yeah, and Sue and I have been really flat out, so we haven't really finalized that, but they have offered to come down and we're definitely gonna pursue it. Then also the state wetlands biologist has said she'll come down and do a training as well.
And I'll repeat what I said, if I can make it to that and they're amenable to that, I'd be happy to act as a volunteer for BCTV and record some of it so that anybody, interested citizen of the town could sort of see some of that, sounds exciting, historic stuff or wetlands, biology related stuff, so.
We're gonna try and pull in the public, particularly for the historic district one, and the planning commission and the conservation commission, I think, are also gonna be involved with the wetlands.
Wow. You may need to get a parade permit, right?
I do.
All right, I don't have any other business. Anybody else?
Do you want to do it? I move we adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion passes 4-0. Meeting's adjourned at 8:15.
Wow, that was a good.
Not too bad.
Somebody voluntarily.